You're listening to Codepunk with Bill Ahern and Michael Zuhl, a podcast about the intersection between programming, technology, and the digital lifestyle.
Hello, Michael. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good, man. We had a little bit of extra time off, but we pushed the last couple of episodes out, I thought, at pretty good timing, and I'm happy to say that the numbers for the podcast have been steadily going up. And it used to be slow and steady, and slow and steady I was perfectly fine with that. But I've noticed that the last 2 months we've seen a market increase, and something about the last two episode releases. I know we did the bots one, and then we did the ransomware one this month. I mean, we haven't released one in May yet. We'll be probably releasing at least this episode that we're recording right now, maybe even the second one that we record after this one, both in May. But we've already had probably half the amount of downloads in the month of May that we normally get in a month where we've released 2 episodes. So it's been steadily increasing. And we're getting some good listeners, and I'd like to get some good feedback. So, I mean, if you guys out there are listening, you got any recommendations for topics, or you want to review us or anything like that, I mean, I'd be more than happy to listen to all that. I know Bill will be more than happy to listen to all that. So we'd like that feedback. On the news side of things, as you well know, Bill, I spoke at EdUI last year. I spoke about TypeScript. I actually submitted 2 proposals this year, and both of them got accepted. So I'm going to speak there again in September. The first talk is actually going to be about bots, which is something that we did a podcast episode about. And the second one is going to be about progressive web apps, which we actually have plans to do another podcast about. Yep. And what I like about this, going to this one, is that last year we were kind of just starting to get our footing under us as far as this podcast goes. And so there wasn't really an opportunity to promote us heavily. We still had a couple of audio issues we were trying to work out. The presentation I was kind of giving with a coworker, so it was kind of like a work thing, and I felt a little bad self-promoting it, so I kind of had to do it like, casually. But this year, I mean, the bots talk is purely about, me and what I've been doing with the bot framework. And so one of the examples that I'll actually be giving at the talk will be the Codepunk bot that, I developed as an example for that episode. So it looks like we're going to pick up a lot more listeners, and hopefully it won't be too self-promotional. I know a lot of people get some interesting things, and I'm heavy on the TypeScript side, so there'll be a lot more TypeScript going there. But things are really looking up for the website, for the podcast in general, and I feel pretty good about coding these days. I'm feeling pretty good about the direction that things are taking and how technology has been advancing. If there's one good thing about the news cycle, it seems to have been a lot of the things in technology that are coming out. I don't know, how have you felt about the last month or so, how things have been escalating?
I feel like there's some sort of explosion. Maybe that's not the right word to use. That's too sensational. I think that coding in general, both as a professional and just sort of as it enters into the social zeitgeist, and you have to forgive my use of the word, but I can't think of another way, the social consciousness. You have there was a supermodel I saw. I don't have a link or anything, but I just remember seeing a supermodel got into how she's starting a program for young women to get into coding. Because other than the fact that she's, a supermodel who makes a lot of money doing that, she's very interested in coding. And I saw that, for better or worse, Hillary Clinton was interested in doing some sort of presentation for getting young women into coding. So the reason I mention those people is because, there's clearly a push towards getting people moved towards technology, building it, becoming a maker, getting involved in shaping how the technology changes, not just sitting and waiting for major companies to do it for us. That it's sort of democratizing technology, not only how we use it, but how we build it. And I think that that's really great. And I think that there's a lot going on in the technology sphere. Microsoft just released their Fluid, which I'd actually like to do a show on at some time in the future. Just not necessarily like how Google has their material, what they call a design language, but Microsoft has their Fluid. And it's not just about graphic design. It's about everything. It's about interaction. It's about just complete interaction on all platforms, be it 3D, 2D, websites, virtual reality. There's a lot happening in the technology space, and I find it to be very exciting.
And that was Project Neon, right? And is that what they're now calling Fluid?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you and I have talked in the past. I mean, we've talked about artificial intelligence, and we've talked about hooking into the grid in past episodes, in fact. And you know me, I'm of the mind that AI is not out to destroy us, and it won't be out to destroy us. And there's nothing, at least necessarily, that I see on the horizon that would indicate that is such a thing. But there are other people in the industry, very smart people, very wealthy people, who seem to be of the mind that AI is the biggest threat to humanity that we've ever seen. And one of those people is actually Elon Musk, and of course he's PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla. He's the guy that they basically patterned Tony Stark after for the original Iron Man movie. Really, really smart guy, has a bit of a fear about AI. And recent news story, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit in this episode, and then we're going to move off into something a little more cyberpunk based on it, is that he has developed a new company called NeuralLink, and the goal is to basically merge us with machines, kind of turning us into cyborgs, allowing us to link up to the web, or link up to technology, and turn us into kind of that hybrid style man and machine that really who's the forecaster who works for Google now, the one who talks about the singularity all the time. Name escapes my.
I can't remember his name either.
You know who I'm talking about, though. And it's kind of his dream. And so Neuralink has now become Elon Musk's kind of baby project, and he's trying to develop the ultra high bandwidth brain machine interfaces, which sounds pretty interesting. And I wanted to get your take on this, because this seems extremely far-fetched, especially in the near term. But then again, all of Musk's companies have been relatively far-fetched, and he's been successful with at least Tesla and SpaceX. But what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are, I had a conversation at work about this. The idea, and it depends on what people think when they think about like neural interfaces. If you're talking about creating some sort of hardware that interacts directly with synapses and of the brain, that's really, really far out. At least I agree with coworkers who come to that consensus. So you have ways to kind of intercept brainwave patterns, to read them and maybe have influence over them. When we'll talk about it, there's a company that tries to use brainwave patterns to manipulate, say, a prosthetic arm. So it's not far-fetched when you understand probably the leaps and bounds that technology has made with that. But at the same time, too, AI in general, just in terms of any kind of threat that it poses, I don't really see it. Although it was a funny thing at work, because I said, hey, listen, if we had the technology now to plug in something into my brain and the proverbial jack in and use it to control technology, to get to the internet and the matrix and all that stuff, I'd be all for it. But a coworker presented an interesting point. He said, listen, we all in this room do software development. How much time do we all spend squashing bugs? Do you really want to put that stuff in your brain? I was like, well, that's a good point. It's a pretty good point.
So Ray Kurzweil was the guy that I was thinking of, whose name escaped my mind. And
that's right. Yeah.
I'm a bad geek for forgetting that, but in the moment, his name wasn't on the tip of my tongue.
I was thinking of somebody else, because I forgot that Kurzweil is now at Google. Because Kurzweil, I know. Yeah, that's right. I forgot all about that.
Yeah, he's the big singularity guy, and his idea is that unlike the doom and gloom of some people, his idea is that the machines will essentially save us, and that we will be able to join with the machines and go live as Cylons off in some faraway region of space or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of issues with hooking. I mean, look, we have certain techniques that we can use to read information from the brain and to stimulate the brain in such a fashion that the brain can then recognize that information. This is being done right now. And as you said, I mean, there are many things with prosthetics and with other areas to where they're able to cause feeling, or they're able to control certain things with just their brain waves. But these are all non-invasive connections. So, I mean, it might be that you're wearing this, a bunch of electrodes on your head when when it's reading the signals, the neurological activity from your brain, or it could be that you have a bunch of electrodes on your brain when it's, trying to stimulate certain areas. That's how all of the testing has been done. Nobody's jamming, RAM into anybody's brain right now. And there are a lot of reasons why. I mean, there's a really, really great article that I encourage anybody to read. It's on Wait But Why, and it's about NeuralLink. And the guy does like maybe one blog post a month, but it is an incredibly in-depth, and he managed to talk to Elon Musk, and they talked about the NeuralLink project. And the best section, of course, when it talks about major hurdles. And he talks about things like bandwidth. Like, look, you know how many electrodes it would take to basically allow vision to equal, basically the amount of electrodes that we've currently ever used within a brain is only enough to amount to a super low resolution image for vision. We've not done enough for simple commands. We've not done enough for those electrodes to read thought patterns or anything like that. It's been very, very limited. And in order to do what Elon Musk needs to do, you're talking about upwards of 100,000 to 1 million recorded neurons. How many connections, how many electrodes do you actually have to have connected to the brain in order for something like that to happen? It seems massive. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Elon Musk knows how to scale, but there's cause for concerns there. That's a lot of hardware. Implantation is another concern. We're talking about invasive. You're talking about surgically implanting something into somebody's head. What are the implications of infection? What are the implications of if something goes wrong on whatever board or whatever piece of electronic is actually inserted?
Because remember, electronics have radiation, so there's any kinds of there's always that old fear like cell phones are going to give you cancer. Who knows what happens if you actually put technology in your head?
Right, and technology meant for communication issues. I mean, obviously they do things like they put shunts in children's head with who have swelling of the brain. So I mean, they can do invasive procedures in the brain in order to produce positive results, but we're not talking about things that emit electronic signals.
Right. I wanted to make one point that you had mentioned vision, and before we get too far away from that, so one of when I was doing research, there's another company. Now this isn't related to Elon Musk, but we're talking about trying to find ways to kind of enhance us using technology, and there's a company called Brainport. And so what they do is for vision, they have a pair of sunglasses and they have a camera on the sunglass, like right in the center, between the eyes. And then and they also have a thing called a tongue array. And what happens is the camera takes whatever the picture is, it's a video, I guess, or it does like sequences of images. That's, not enough to consider like actual video, but whatever the case is. And then it'll send impulses to this tongue array, like little bubbles. And for light, it's, I kind of have to read again. So they have 400 electrodes connected to this tongue array thing. And it goes from like no, I guess, like pulse, right? To a medium pulse, which is gray, to like a strong pulse, which is black, I think how it works. And then apparently they have like a way to have a comparison, like a video comparison of the tongue display, and it gives you a very pixelated but clear view of an object. In this case, it's a coffee mug, and they're just showing how they're able to give blind people rudimentary vision using this tongue array, which then sends signals up back into the brain that the brain can interpret somehow. Which right. Because we're talking about interfacing directly with the brain and all these different things, but then we forget that the body itself has to route all these signals back to the brain to interpret behavior and function, and we just don't sometimes. At least I never would have thought using the tongue as a way to send signals to interpret vision, which is insane. That's awesome,
right? And I mean, there are plenty of patents on the market, and there are plenty of patients who have had, I guess, body-mind interfaces connected, and all of them obviously have some sort of wiring coming out of their brain, or for whatever reason, no matter what's trying to be stimulated. So I don't want to sit here and say it's impossible, and we've never inserted things with sensors inside of the brain, because of course we have. We've never. What I mean to say is that we've never implanted something as complex as what Elon Musk is proposing, and we've never attempted to, and we've never done something that ambitious. And I certainly wouldn't want to be an early adopter of that, because again, if you're talking about something that's connected to a network, you're talking about something that's then exposed to, like you said, bad software or hackers or any type of other common breakdown issues. I mean, how long before the device needs to be upgraded? What kind of procedure does that look like? There are a lot of difficulties in envisioning. There's difficulties in envisioning how we get there and what the intermediate steps are between where we are today and actually being able to easily insert some sort of a nano device into the brain that just works seamlessly. I mean,
Right,
that
especially-
seems like science fiction.
And the number one problem that everyone has with this technology, which I don't see is a problem that will go away anytime soon: power, batteries.
Right.
How do you keep these things on?
Right. And then there's a company, so it's University of Illinois is working on an interface called Silk, which is supposed to address some of these concerns of invasiveness, and apparently it can be rolled up into a thin tube-like bundle, and they insert that into the brain relatively non-invasively. Of course, anytime you use the word relative, well, relative to cutting your skull open and actually dropping something directly in there. So again, I mean, if you look at when the procedure to put in shunts, it's not that huge of an operation. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a brain surgeons get paid $500,000 a year for a reason. It's difficult. So even a small hole that drills into the brain is a difficult procedure, but something that's relatively less invasive is of course a whole lot better than something that's completely invasive. And so this tiny bundle apparently, once it's inserted, can then spread around the brain. And then this sentence cracks me up, right? So I'm going to read this directly. There, it would theoretically spread around the brain and melt into the contours like shrink wrapped. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm not too excited about the term brain and melt in the same sentence. So it could be just a poor choice of words, but basically the idea is they're going to put this thing into your brain and then it's going to unravel, wrap around your brain, and then almost like they say shrink wrap, but I guess very similar to maybe like cotton candy, the way cotton candy melts on impact of water or whatever, and it's just going to seep into the crevices. And I guess that's why they term it silk. And apparently it's some sort of flexible silicon transistor array. But I mean, this is like in theory.
Right.
So maybe they succeeded on the brains of mice, but we're talking about human beings, and Musk's ambition is to, I think he said what did he say, 2020 or 2021? Hopes to start delivering some of the new technology by 2021. So I don't know what that some part of it is as far as the new technology, but that's mighty ambitious to say that within the next 4 years, 7 years max, that you're going to start delivering on, body-mind interfaces that are very similar to interfacing with computers. Highly ambitious. I like the idea. I'm glad that somebody has said, I have $1 billion, screw it, let me invest in something that's crazy. Because even if he utterly and completely fails, at least somebody will have learned an awful lot about this.
Yeah, exactly.
But this, out of all of his projects, this seems like the most incredibly far-reaching. But it reminds me of, and a lot of people will look at this and be like, oh, you're jacking into the system. And, this is kind of like the Matrix. Now, we crapped all over the Matrix in an earlier episode, although we both loved the first, movie, The Matrix. I mean, understandably, we both have our issues with The Matrix 2 and 3, and we kind of see that as the point in which cyberpunk kind of started to die. But prior to The Matrix, Keanu Reeves was able to flex his muscles as a Neo-type figure in a movie that I'm actually pretty fond of. I don't know how you feel about it, but Johnny Mnemonic. And of course, in Johnny Mnemonic, he has a body-mind interface because he basically has this brain implant in which he can store information into his brain. He had to dump some of his memory in order to get it, and then of course they put in too much information, and that kind of creates the storyline. And this is based on a William Gibson story, actually, who obviously wrote Neuromancer. And this was 1995, I want to say. There are some questionable acting in some areas of the movie, and then there's some fantastic acting in some of the movies, and you get a Henry Rollins cameo, so you can never go wrong with that. So what do you think about the concept there and how it kind of connects to NeuralLink, and what were your thoughts on the movie? And was it something that, once again, William Gibson is very much ahead of his time in discussing a lot of these cyberpunk-esque ideas of how technology and human beings will work? Or do you think that the movie, which is mostly, I mean, there are some differences between the short story and the movie, but the movie is mostly pretty faithful to the material, at least in spirit. And I want to get your opinion on that.
I love the movie, and like you said, there was, it was a sci-fi, almost feels kind of like a low budget movie. It didn't feel like high action, and that's okay. I actually, for the flaws that the movie has, I think some of the points, the issues that technology raises were way more interesting, and they did a couple cool things. And I think that, first of all, just in terms of the technology getting from here to there, again, we're way far off from that. And I think the reason Gibson was able to kind of get to some of these really cool concepts was he wasn't already coming from a place of being a technologist, right? So he wasn't sort of held up by feasibility. Oh, well, no, well, that doesn't make sense. He was like, screw it. I could just total suspension of disbelief. He wrote he wrote, I was going to call it, Neuromancer. He wrote that on a typewriter, like a good old fashioned typewriter.
Right. He was not a technology superstar. He was very technologically ignorant when he wrote those.
And he was inspired by the idea of the man-machine interface. He was inspired by the trance-like state he witnessed a kid playing a video game in an arcade. So he noticed there was like this overstimulation, and like this kid was just like totally zoned out, and he was in the matrix. That's kind of how Gibson envisioned it. So he was able to build on that without any kind of like being burdened with the knowledge of technology, right? Which is a nice thing. Now, the reason I liked Johnny Mnemonic so much, other than the fact that Rollins does make an awesome cameo, and more than just a little cameo, he's actually kind of got like a minor role in it.
Yeah.
And the part that they actually added, and Gibson did actually write the screenplay. So not only did he write the original story, he kind of came into it and, fleshed this out and made it more for a movie. I love the idea of the way they did the encryption, and I didn't even really follow it when the movie was out. But looking back now, you want to talk about being ahead of the time. So as Keanu Reeves' character, Johnny Mnemonic, is downloading, in fact, too much data to his brain because it wasn't set up. He didn't have enough memory, to facilitate it. But one of the things they did for the encryption was they would randomly play, they would flip through channels on a TV, and those images would become pictographs that were used for encryption. And that was the only way to then unlock the encrypted data in his mind, was to have a printout of the images as they were they were like run on certain second intervals. Do you remember that?
Yeah. In fact, there was a podcast not that long ago that I listened to that actually had, I think it was David Crockford, who's the JavaScript guy, but he's been working on a way to eliminate the need for passwords. And he kind of says, look, your computer is your device. You should never let anybody on it. And if you never let anybody on it, you could then use this type of interface. And he went through all of these different things. And one of the things he talked about was introducing entropy. And in order to create the password, or create the private key, it actually turns on your camera and it snaps several photos, random photos of the room, and I think even screenshots on the screen itself. And it does that to introduce entropy that they can then be used in the private key that can't be easily cracked. So I mean, it's right along the lines of those images in Johnny Mnemonic, as far as here are keys, because what they are is entropy as part of the private key that helps to unlock that data. And you're right, it's very much I mean, I even wonder if he researched some of that, the way he was able to target that, because I don't remember. Even, 1995 is not that long ago. I'm sure they were doing those type of things in cryptography, or at least introducing entropy to a certain extent. But the way it was portrayed in the movie was phenomenal, at least in my opinion. And the other part of that I found very interesting, not of that, but of Johnny Mnemonic as a whole, is this introduction of physical diseases as a result of data in the airwaves, which to me was something I had never even thought of before, but it kind of makes perfect sense.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what I was going to get to.
Right, because it was his bodyguard Jane. She was infected with I want to say NSA, but it's not NSA.
It was NAS, nerve attenuation syndrome.
Right. So I was close, but yeah, and they mentioned several different diseases that were a result, that were progressively getting worse for people who were involved in technology, and that's part of that. And the way mega corporations have been running things is part of the reason why they introduced the low techs, who are staying away from all of that. Now, I thought the low techs were probably the most uninteresting part of the movie. I mean, because it introduces that kind of fear of technology or that kind of need to want to move away from technology, which, I mean, obviously I'm against that. I understand the need to moderate and not, fall completely into worship of technology. But, for me to get on the low techs were kind of the representation of technology is evil, which it's not, it's the usage of it. But the use of the low techs in order to get to the military dolphin that's a drug addict, I thought was an interesting way to kind of say, hey, we've been safeguarding, this for the right time in order to bring down this mega corporation, which of course is Japanese because it's, cyberpunk, and you got to have Japanese culture mixed into it.
Right, especially in the 90s, you know what I mean? Like, and Gibson had done that. I mean, that was a Gibson thing. His books always had the mega corporations were just called zaibatsus, which is just a Japanese word for mega corporation.
Right, because at the time technology was very high in Japan, and it was basically, Japan was a major competitor when it came to production of electronic equipment and high technology. So it made perfect sense that this burgeoning country so highly invested in the newness of technology and how it affects culture would be one of the primary movers and shakers in a dystopian future where mega corporations and technologies rule over everything. I mean, it's
right.
and it introduces for especially for Americans, it introduces an interesting cultural dynamic between the collectivism of an Asian society like the Japanese culture and the individualism of American society. In Johnny Mnemonic, you see that because it was a Shinjin, was he the main villain, or was it I know Takahashi was the main corporate villain.
Yeah, he was like the CEO. I can't remember the sort of assassin.
Right.
I can't remember his name.
So the assassin had, of course, a missing thumb, which was replaced with a prosthetic that had like this laser, whip thing on it. And the reason why he had that was because he basically had to cut off his own thumb because he had failed in a previous, a previous mission or whatever.
Right. It was one of those called those honor. I forget what they call it when they have to like cut off their pinky. It's like if I was more well versed in it, but everybody knows what it means. You cut it off. But I remember in the book it was cool because the way Gibson had described it was he had turned a disgrace into a strength,
right.
And it was called a nanofilament. Okay. Basically, it was like a nanometer long filament that he used as a garrote. Basically, you just cut people's heads off with it, pretty much.
And that was one of the most badass things in the entire movie. I mean,
yeah, it was awesome
to see him wield that. That was the only time where you felt that. I think that was probably the only time that I felt that, Johnny Mnemonic was at least in some danger. Because even with Dolph Lundgren's character, Carl Honig, who, oddly enough, I find it amazing that this was actually Dolph Lundgren's last theatrical film release until the Expendables movie. So he went from Johnny Mnemonic was his last film that was actually put into theaters and not direct to video before the Expendables. That's a pretty long dry spell. And
that's an interesting bit of trivia. I did not know that.
Yes, it's and Dolph Lundgren to me plays an incredibly over the top messianic role. And to me, it's a complete. I mean, he overdoes it, he overacts it, and it comes across as extremely cheesy, especially the dialogue. But it's kind of enjoyable, and it's so weird because a lot of his scenes are shared with Henry Rollins, and Henry Rollins is the one that's normally known for doing the over the top, extremely cheesy dialogue. And you have Henry Rollins is basically playing it straight, and he's trying to help everybody. And here's Dolph Lundgren coming in, larger than life, acting like he's Jesus with his implants and just crushing people like he was still in a Rocky movie or something.
Their confrontation, I think, is one of the highlights of the movie, no doubt.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and because that's when all the story starts to kind of fall together. That's when you realize the connections with the low techs and the connections, with the diseases and kind of what's going on. And it kind of, it's the catalyst to the story that kind of moves you on to the third act, and to, the big, fight scene, the big battle up on the bridge. Which bridge was that? Did that, I can't remember if that was an actual landmark, if it was just something that they made up.
It was the Golden Gate Bridge. They called it Heaven.
Okay, it was the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, and he had actually used that. So he pulled elements of various stories that he had into that movie. So Heaven actually made an appearance in his, what is it, second trilogy. I think it was in All Tomorrow's Parties. I mean, it's just for the, Gibson nerds. But yeah, so Gibson did pull in different bits of different stories and put them into that. And that was called Heaven. It was actually the Golden Gate Bridge that had like fallen apart.
Right. Okay. So how do you feel about Jones? Of course, Jones is what I was talking about earlier, was the military dolphin, the military telekinetic dolphin who, at least I don't think in the movie, but at least in the book, he was a heroin. He was addicted to heroin, right?
Yeah, that he was addicted to heroin. Yeah. And that's, Gibson has said many, many times that he was largely influenced by William Burroughs. And you could see the influence there when you have your junkie military dolphin who was, being strung along on heroin by the military to utilize its ability to use sound waves and telepathy to infiltrate systems or to infiltrate electronic systems on submarines for enemies. And so a little bit of a Cold War throwback, because I believe in the original stories it was the Russians. Jones, I don't know. You know what? I felt it's a really great idea in a book, right? Like the concept in your mind is like, oh, that's interesting. I felt like in the movie it was a little incongruous with everything else, but I guess that's okay because the movie was sort of bizarre anyway. You already have like the overacted religious assassin in Dolph Lundgren. You have Dr. Allcom, Henry Rollins is like angry Rollins-esque, doctor. And even the I forget her name, the girl who played, what was the female assassin's name? Because
the second lead, Jane, because she's really Molly Mirrorshades, and for some reason Gibson never made her, or maybe the producers didn't want to do it. She's actually Molly Mirrorshades, who's like the famous mirror shaded, street assassin in his books in the original Sprawl trilogy. Right. I forgot all about that.
So that's who she is, and I wasn't really happy because since I knew the story, I was kind of like, oh, why'd they change her? But because there's already so many colorful, interesting, kind of out there characters, the fact that that Jones just felt out of place to me is probably just personal preference. I think it was kind of neat, I guess. But ultimately, if you're asking me my opinion, they could have left him out and worked with some other plot device.
Looking back on it, Jones, looking back on it, I can live with, Dolph Lundgren's, messianic character because of how bizarre that kind of played out, but also because of the implants and everything, it kind of showed to an extreme what could happen when you start replacing your body parts with all of these implants, and you get to this sense that you are almost like a god because you can't die and you're swapping in and out of things. I mean he could have been a final villain in his own right, but I understand why they had to use Jones. But looking back on the film, I think that's the one thing that might not hold up as well. Other than that, I think by large the movie holds up well for me. I own a copy of it on DVD. I don't know if it's on Blu-ray. If it is, I will certainly get it. I do watch it probably at least once a year. I probably watch Johnny Mnemonic more than when The Matrix came out, I saw it like 7 times in a movie theater, the original one. Haven't watched it since. I've only ever watched 2 and 3 once, but I probably watch Johnny Mnemonic like once a year because every once in a while I think about it. I'm like, yeah, I really want to grab that Johnny Mnemonic film, and watch that again because I do like the whole idea of it and kind of how the storyline unfolds. And of course, going back to the idea of the brain implant, this really introduces a lot of the dangers of that because we don't live in a dystopia, but we do live in an era of large corporations who control a lot of things. We do live with corporate espionage. We do live with large scale hacking that is funded by government entities. And you're talking about introducing a device into your brain that could potentially be hacked. They're on the news just this week, actually this weekend, was about all the healthcare hackings at all of the major healthcare institutions in England and a couple of other places where machines were being put on lockdown because of this major breach, and it was used and the breach occurred because of leaked NSA tools. So the NSA had the capacity to do these things. So government had the capacity to do these things with these tools. The tools were stolen and then leaked, and then hackers used them to basically shut down a lot of healthcare systems in Britain. And you look at things like that, and then you introduce objects that can be hacked into somebody's brain or objects that can be altered in somebody's brain. And you end up into a situation like Johnny Mnemonic, where if you're carrying valuable information inside of your brain as a courier, I mean, what corporate institution would not want to have somebody where they can inject information directly into their brain? There's no disk to be stolen. Even that person doesn't have the encryption key to decrypt that information, and you're just relying on that person to get from point A to point B. I mean, if that could happen, corporations would want it today.
Probably. And, personally, we're talking about would I not, as we pontificate whether or not we would want to get that kind of just the implants themselves have some sort of neural interface to, maybe go on the web and see data represented as like glowing geodesics and glowing shapes, right? Which is something else, by the way, that Johnny Mnemonic hit the nail on the head, right? First of all, I just want to kind of mention that as an aside. Like, it was the first time we really saw the Matrix represented as Gibson described it,
right,
as these sort of like objects, neon objects in a vast space. It was really cool to see that, which is certainly one of the highlights of the movie too. But, I would not want to be a courier of highly sensitive corporate data in my brain, because a competing company could be like, well, if we can't get the data, the next best thing we could do is asset denial and just shoot you in the head. You know what I mean? Like,
or brick your brain.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, that's the last thing I want. Oh, great, blue screen of death on my gray matter. No, thank you.
Because of course it would be made by Microsoft.
Right, naturally.
So do you got any closing thoughts for this?
I don't. If I had any, actually, I do have one closing thought. If we're talking about Gibson and good movies in the 90s that were sort of like in that cyberpunk vein, I want to give an honorable mention to New Rose Hotel with Christopher Walken and I've drawn a blank on his name, Willem Dafoe. It's not high tech, but what it does is it gets into Gibson's aspects of corporate espionage and like stealing really smart scientists from corporation to corporation doing like these corporate extractions. It's a phenomenal movie, and it's very Gibsonian, and it's just, if we're going to talk about Gibson movies, New Rose Hotel is definitely one worth checking out.
We'll have to put it on the list. I mean, anything Gibson or Gibson-esque is worthy of a podcast episode. And these are the ones that actually, I mean, I really enjoy these, and obviously I know you enjoy these. And our Strange Days one was probably, other than most recently, I think the Bots podcast probably outdid Strange Days, but Strange Days was running as our most downloaded podcast episode, mostly because of help from the cyberpunk community on Reddit. So these ones are interesting to us because, again, it's cyberpunk. It's part of our childhood. It's part of us growing up. And so I look forward to actually doing more of these.
Yeah, same here.
All right, we'll keep an eye on Elon Musk, and hopefully within the next 4 or 5 years, we'll see some progress. I don't want to doubt the man, but and there is technology out there, but I don't anticipate that within 5 years we'll have full implants. But maybe there will be some sort of interface. So we'll keep an eye on that story, and if there's any updates, we'll definitely let you guys know, whether it's just on the website or we bring it up in a conversation. But until then, we will talk to you later.
Take care, everybody.
That's it for this episode of Codepunk. You can subscribe to this podcast on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, or listen to it on the web at codepunk.io. You can find Bill on Twitter at Norathustra and Michael on Twitter at Zool.